My name is Elaine Moore. I was born Elaine Hinchcliffe. I've had 2 marriages. I was a Moulder and then a Moore. I was born in Richmond and spent my early years in Richmond, which was a sort of 3-4 generations of my family were brought up in Richmond. Moved out.
What was it like living in Richmond in those days?
Well, you were a kid up to 17 and it was great. You know, it was different times. You played in the street. You came in when the lights came on. Everyone just went into everyone's houses and, you know, yeah, it was good fun. You knew everybody in the street, you know. And I went to primary school and high school there. When I was 17, my mother moved to East Kew, which of course I went with her, and at 20 I got married. Moved to Hawthorn, but that marriage didn't last very long, and Mum had moved from East Kew to Plenty on 5 acres, so I went with her and lived there. Brought up my 2 girls. I had 2 daughters, and I was with her for trying to think how many years. 10 years, and then I met my second husband. Had 1 child, and moved to Hurstbridge. I owned that house for 20 years, but didn't spend a lot of the later years in Hurstbridge because my mother and father were ill, so I went to Plenty every day to look after them. Dad passed, he had cancer 6 months, and Mum, they said Mum wouldn't last the year, but she went on for 12 years, so I looked after Mum for 12 years. And then when Mum passed away, I inherited half the house, so I bought it from my brother, the other half, and stayed there for a few years until I decided 5 acres was a bit much for myself on my own, and thought it was time to size down. And the traffic on Yanyan Road was getting, because the house was on Yanyan Road, and we'd been there 46 years all up. Figured that once they built Lorimer and all those estates that it was time to move out. So I moved to Whittlesea 10 years ago, just before the bushfires. We moved in December, and February were the bushfires, which was sad for a lot of people around the Kinglake area and other areas. So that's how long I've been here. But I hadn't the earlier part of 10 years because I've been a carer for my grandchildren a lot, and I didn't have a lot of time to mix with the community. My daughter was in hospital for 18 months at the Austin, so every day, because she'd had a child and the child was with me, I had to take the child in to bond with her every day. So that was 18 months, and in between time looking after other grandchildren. And then, and my granddaughter, my eldest granddaughter came and lived with me when she was 16, and she's now 23. She's moved out 3 months ago, and I feel as though I've got time for me now. Yes, you can clean your house and go out for the day and go back, and the house is exactly how you left it. So there's no that extra work, you know, what I used to do because of wanting everything perfect.
And so now you've got time to sort of engage with the community.
Yes, which I have. I've been a volunteer. Family history. We do genealogy, teaching that in Mill Park Library for near on 13 years, I think. And we have about 20 in the class. And then when Whittlesea opened, I offer my services here, and I'm a volunteer for the Whittlesea Library 1 day a week. Because of there's not the room to have a class with computers for everyone, I do teach one-on-one once a week for an hour for each person.
So being sort of connected with so many people who are doing family history must give you a great sense of the movement of people across time, and especially into this area.
Yeah, very much, yes. My eldest daughter moved here before I did, and she was on a 10-acre property for quite a few years, and then she's on a 20-acre property now, and still in the Whittlesea area. So, but their life's busy, so they work and go on their holidays. So, but they're thinking about moving again. They're ones who keep upgrading, and but they're looking at Whittlesea to still look for something different. When we moved to Union Road, it was 1971, and I had 2 girls, and one was 6 and one was 1. 7 months. And it was a quiet country road. My 6-year-old went to Plenty Primary School, and I did drive her, and the reason being at that time there was only a horse trail, not a footpath, and on one side of Union Road, so it wasn't really good walking. And so I used to drive her, which was 2 kilometres, I think, or 1.5 from the house. The community was a lovely community at the time, and I was very involved with the Plenty Tennis Club and the Mothers Club of the school. And we then, I think it was the Kennett government, shut a lot of schools around Victoria and train services, country trains, and the school was closed down. And by that time, though, I'd remarried and moved to Hurstbridge. My eldest at that time was in high school, and my youngest was in grade 3, and we moved to Hurstbridge. But in saying that, moving to Hurstbridge, it wasn't long before my mother and father were ill, and I went there every day to look after them. And as I said, Dad passed away in 1990, and Mum was supposed to pass away then, but she went on for another 12 years. I think it was 2001 she passed away, but I went there every day. But the last 2 years I moved in with her, left my 18-year-old daughter in my house in Hurstbridge, thinking it would be any day that she would pass, but she didn't. She went on another 2 years. She was a fighter, yeah. But there was, the children had a great life. They had horses, and it was a good time. Then the traffic came. They started to build the estate, starting with Lorimer. And then I thought, well, I'll buy up in Whittlesea, and I bought a smaller home and on a bend again. But And actually it turned out that I have more work than I did at Plenty, because the horses ate the grass at Plenty. I've bought on a corner, so I've got a very sweeping nature strip out the front. So, and hedges that I've got to trim. So there seems to, what I thought would be a lifestyle change, that less work, has turned out to be more work, or not myself now. But more money, I have to pay people to do it. But I love the area. Across the road is only the mountain. There's no houses across the road. That's why I chose this house, because I'd come off 5 acres and I wanted that, not many neighbours. That's why I chose on the corner too. I've only got one neighbour on one side of me, and yeah. So, and the people in Whittlesea, everyone's so friendly and very supportive when the fire was on. Everyone came together and yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about that period with the fires? Or?
It wasn't affecting me so much. I was in the house and I'm facing Mount Disappointment, so I could see the fire on the far left-hand corner of Mount Disappointment. And my daughter, living up Wallen Road at the time, rang me and said, "Mum, get out, we're going, the fire's at our back paddock." But we all thought at the time it was heading towards Eden Park. So we're just watching, and being at the end of the town, most of the people had come up to have a look in my street. And we did all the right things and covered up the doorways with towels and wet towels, and but not thinking it was coming to the township, but just being prepared. And all the people were up there sitting on my fence, brick fence, and all of a sudden the wind changed. This was hours and hours later. The wind changed and the fire from the left-hand corner just went straight across the top of Mount Disappointment right to Kinglake Ranges, as fast as you like. And that's when I did go, picked up the animals and photo albums, that's all, and kids in the car, and went to stay at my sister-in-law's in Kew for the night, because we were getting a lot of ash falling down and things like that, but otherwise our house and everything was safe. It just went across that mountain like a train. Yeah, it was very sad for the people, and people who, a man who just mowed my lawn that week had lost his life in the fire. I didn't know him very well because I'd only been there 2 months myself, but I did volunteer work, handing out, we organised free things from different factories, shoes and clothing, and we set up in my daughter's girlfriend's sports shop in the township, and we gave them out to people, and yeah, so there was a lot of sad stories there.
Yeah, well, we won't dig too deeply into there.
Yeah.
I guess I was just wondering, now that you're looking after your grandkids, do you ever think about how their life is different to what your life was like at the same age?
Oh, yes. We had a lot more freedom, and they haven't got that freedom now, and we made up our own games a lot. We didn't need material things. I remember I think I had $1 and pram, and that was my major thing for one of the Christmases. The other Christmases I probably got colouring book or pencils or something like that. They need things to stimulate them all the time, or their parents to take them out, take them to parks but I suppose that we walked to parks in those days. And they want, even in the home, they want to be entertained by the parents, drawing with them, and we just made up our own things. I remember making a lot of mud pies, pretending it was a kitchen, and technology, and we were more active, very, very much. And when you look, most of the people were slim. Your parents were slim. The whole street was slim. You rarely saw a big person, unless it was like an inherited thing. But we were, now you look around and we're all bigger people. We don't exercise or move about so much. We didn't have cars, so we walked, maybe your father had a car, but he took it to work, and you didn't think that you want him to drive you up to the shop to get something. You walked. You didn't even think of that. So.
What did your father do for work?
In the early days when I was young, I can remember him being a driver of wood in the winter, delivering wood to houses, and ice in the summer. So we'd go, because people had they're not refrigerated. Just before refrigerators had cool boxes. I think they used a block of ice to keep their food cool. So he delivered that, and then he, I think in his younger years, he worked at Kennard's tannery. That would have been a terrible job, very smelly, and but most of my school times he worked at McElroy's, where they made taps in next to Brighton and May in Church Street, Richmond, and he had an accident and had one of his fingers cut off in the machine, and after that they made a guard for that machine so it wouldn't happen again. And then the factory moved to Coburg in Newlands Road. So even when we lived in Plenty, he used to have, at first in 71, he was driving to Richmond, and then when they moved to Newlands Road not long after, he drove from Plenty to Coburg. My mother worked also. She worked in a factory in Richmond, in Church Street also, a knitwear factory called David Keys, and she was an invisible mender. And she used to...
Sorry, what's an invisible mender?
Well, when the garments came off the knitting machines, with very small knitted garments, like this sort of, sometimes they'd come with a flaw, a run in the article, so Mum's job was to pick up and mend that with a sewing needle, with a latch and needle, and so she actually knitted with a needle. And you couldn't even tell. But she was good with crocheting, knitting, making clothes. She was very handy. I was good at school in my young days, but I never liked crocheting. It was sort of old-fashioned at the time, but I knitted baby garments since I was 11. Sewing, I made things, but it wasn't really my go either. And if I needed a hem or anything, I'd say, "Here, Mum," because she was so quick. She was just quick and very perfect, So I didn't pursue those things much because, and when she passed on, was the end of my knitting days because my mother was the one who sewed them up perfectly that you couldn't even tell there was a seam. And when I tried to sew them up, there was this lump. So you get things that you didn't take notice of and learn, yeah. So had a few tragedies in my life down in Richmond. My brother, my second eldest brother, had three children. One was 5, 4, and a baby about 18 months, and they lived in Richmond also. And in the days, they lived in a street which was a dead end, so children just played in the street. No traffic came down because it was nowhere to go, and the 4 and 5-year-old were playing out the front. And unfortunately, a man came down and took the little girl to buy an ice cream, and she was never seen again. The little boy came in to tell the parents that she went to get an ice cream with a man, and everyone went looking, and the police sort of didn't take much notice at the time. So the family searched, it was near the river, so they searched, and one of the family members found a little body by the banks of the river, and that man had been at the local hotel, and luckily people had noticed him and whatever, and he got caught fairly quickly, and that was in 1966, and he got sentenced to death, but in those times he was next to be hung after Ronald Ryan, and everyone kicked up in Victoria, stopped the hanging, and they did. So Ronald Ryan was hung, but not Keith Ryrie. So his death sentence got commuted to life, and life's not life. He got out he served 29 years. So he got out in 1997, and he was about 52 years of age. He was 24 when he committed the crime, and so that was a big thing in our family. So when my children were young, they didn't have the freedom as I had because of that, because I was very, very aware for them not to play outside, and I was too restrictive actually, and it didn't take to my third child that I let her have a bit more freedom, but I know my first two were very restricted, and it affected the whole family. In the court case, he was supposed to kill another girl before her, a 16-year-old girl, Maureen Ferrari, at Holmes Glen, but he never got charged because he was convicted to death, so they didn't go ahead. They said, well, they never went ahead with that sentencing, and when he came out, I approached the DPP, which was Bongiorno, to reopen the case, but he said people's memories, in those days, because he admitted to killing the 16-year-old, he could have been bashed in those days by the police to say that, and there was too much. But I've tried again the last year because of DNA, but it's been no response. So it's been on my mind, and it's so many years ago. I was 18, now 70, so yeah. It doesn't go away. And her mother, my brother's passed, but her mother, my sister-in-law, I was best friends with, and I am her power of attorney. And she has Alzheimer's, and I just think it's God's way of letting her finally forget. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's,
tragic story.
yeah, that was a tragic story.
Thanks for sharing that.
So, yeah. But all things better out here in Whittlesea, and
yeah, well, maybe
life goes on.
just to finish up, we could have your thoughts on what you think the future of this area might be like.
Oh dear, like anything, it'll take a while, and houses will come, but I hope they don't. Well, they usually do. The people come and the traffic comes, but they don't put in the infrastructure first. So we'll get overcrowded before they, give us, probably a train line or a, bigger library. That would be lovely to have